If I were king, I would redress an abuse which cuts back, as it were, one half of humankind. I would have women in particular participate in all human rights, especially those of the mind. Those are the words of scientist and philosopher Émilie du Châtelet. Émilie du Châtelet, born Gabrielle Émilie Le Tonnelier de Puteaux la Marquise du Châtelet, was infamously written in history as the famous Enlightenment figure Voltaire's mistress. Though it is not documented, according to the American Physical Society, Émilie du Châtelet has been involved with more than the affairs during the French Enlightenment. She is hardly given credit where credit is due. Growing up and learning about the Enlightenment, I'm sure none of you are even familiar with her work or even her name. And today I will be discussing with you about Émilie, her background, along with the importance of her work and how the Enlightenment wouldn't be complete without any of her work or studies. According to the article titled Émilie du Châtelet, The Woman Science Has Forgotten, Émilie had grown up interested in the math and science fields. Even at a young age, while she was pondering on these subjects, she was already fighting for the rights for women to study these subjects. Émilie had already been rejected by scholarly institutions to seek a higher education because she was a woman. This did not stop her, and being that Émilie's father had been very wealthy, instead she hired her own private tutors. Many famous academic scholars had tutored her and even courted her. As soon as Émilie was educated enough, she began to do her own research and work, specifically in physics. This is around the time that Voltaire enters the equation. Their friendship and affair had begun in 1734, and they began doing research together, specifically on Newton's laws. According to the article, Émilie's accomplishments in science, Voltaire is credited with giving Émilie the last name du Châtelet. In this time period, Émilie had written a French translation of Newton's Law of Principe and began to second his theories and ideas through experimenting with Voltaire himself. Émilie's assistants had helped Voltaire publish his Éléments de philosophie de Newton in 1738. Former tutor Francesco Algarotti had published a book inspired by Émilie's work, Newtonism for the Ladies. This had increased a popular reputation on Émilie and her research in mathematics and Newton's theory. This was the time period that Émilie's work was then published. After testing many theories herself, du Châtelet had anonymously published her Institutions de la Physique in Paris. It discussed the basic principles of knowledge to the nature of space and time and the understanding of natural phenomena associated with gravity, the planetary orbits, the pendulum, and the freefall. She was not credited with her own work until the second edition of her book. According to the American Physical Society, 1743, her book had been translated in several languages all across Europe, and she was listed as one of Europe's best minds in this time period. In 1746, du Châtelet was elected to the Bologna Academy of Sciences. By this time, her institution's book was being taught to her fellow peers. Unfortunately, in 1749, Émilie had passed away from a pulmonary embolism due to childbirth complications several days prior at the age of 43. Du Châtelet's work on Newton's laws were then being credited by fellow philosophers of the Enlightenment. Du Châtelet's Discours sur le bonheur, which translates to Discourse on Happiness, was then published posthumously. This is her most famous text and has appeared in numerous translations and in several editions of the next several centuries. Émilie du Châtelet is indeed a woman forgotten in history to this date. Émilie and her work are in the midst of a comeback, though. There are many novels, articles, and even plays such as Legacy of Light written about her, given the credit where she deserves. She has inspired many young women to pursue the STEM field. Due to her work being credited to men, her name was a forgotten one in the history books. Even though Émilie's lifespan was short, her impact lasted a lifetime.